What's going on, guys? For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Ty, and today in this video, we're going to be talking about CGI and all things visual effects and why they're just so bad in this modern era, or at least I should say inconsistent. I feel like there's so many blockbusters that are going viral from just certain clips where they just look off, and a lot of these films have really large budgets and they're from very respected studios, so it really doesn't make sense why some of these movies just end up having really awful looking sequences. But I want to dive into why that is. Why did CGI used to just look so good? And even though technology has advanced, obviously, like it does in every single facet of our society, for some reason it feels like CGI is just lacking behind what we had 10 or 15 plus years ago at this point. But let's just dive into one reason why I feel this is. I just want to get into the main umbrella. It's going to be studio interference, okay? I don't even want to waste any time here. Let's just dive right into it. At the end of the day, studios are the ones that are making films. They're the ones that are putting their money, or at least the investors are, but still, into these movies. So whatever they say, that's what's going to go at the end of the day. And I understand that. I respect that, because if I was putting $200 or $250 million into something, if I was handling an investment that large, I would want to ensure that it was going to be as good as it possibly could. But at the same time, if I don't know how to make movies, I have to hire talented people. And that's, of course, why movies are made with directors, cinematographers, actors, writers. The list goes on and on and on. And visual effects artists. But still, there has to be some type of mutual agreement between what the studio wants and what the creatives want. They have to sort of meet halfway. They have to just reach out to each other and come to some type of agreement. I think one great example of this would be something like when Disney, of course, that owns Marvel, was making Thor Ragnarok. A lot of people complimented Marvel for sort of letting Taika Waititi do his own thing. It was more of like a funnier, sillier Marvel movie, so they gave the creatives a bit more freedom and the studios took a bit more of a step back. The only problem is, once Thor Love and Thunder came out, the studios took a little bit too far of a step back. Marvel basically let Taika too far off the leash, and that movie ended up being way too silly. It got so much bad reception just overall, and a lot of people didn't enjoy it. So there has to be some type of agreement, because there's plenty of examples over the course of history where studio interference was actually good, even though I feel like it's, always considered some bad thing. But there's also a lot of times where the creatives pushed back for something that they really wanted, and it ended up making the movie a lot better than whatever the studios wanted. But this is the thing. When it comes to visual effects, by the way, the reason I'm bringing this up is because of the fact that this Superman shot from like 2 days ago of him flying, everyone's talking about how bad it looks, when in reality, at least, you can all have your own opinions, don't get me wrong. I think it looks good. Like, I don't think it looks perfect, but I think it looks great. And then James Gunn came out with a comment and said, by the way, there's actually no CGI in this shot, or at least on David Cornsweet's body, even though people are saying that he looks weird and stuff. Maybe that's just how the guy looks, and there's nothing wrong with that. I thought it looked cool. But either way, I think that the way studios have practiced releasing movies is the thing that's rushed these creatives, and that's the thing that I wanted to get into here. I think one of the main reasons why movies have just not looked as good recently is because there's just this schedule. There's always this rush to put out the next film. I think that the MCU is one of the largest factors of that, for sure. And don't get me wrong, I know there's investors and stuff. I have a second reason that I'm going to get to in a second as to why it's been so badly post-pandemic as well. But I think that now there's just this mad dash to get movies out as quickly as possible. And I just feel like studios sometimes forget how complex of a project it is to create a film. Like, don't get me wrong, some things that are a bit more straightforward, like filming and maybe the script writing process, while they are complicated, one thing that absolutely cannot be rushed is the visual arts portion of the filmmaking process, and that's a fact. It feels like now creatives are given maybe like a 2-year turnaround, and they're just telling them, listen, you guys need to hurry up. We're going to put you under even worse working conditions where you got to work, you're working 40-hour weeks, well, now you got to work 60-hour weeks, and they're just pushing them to their absolute limit. They're not putting enough money into them, or maybe they don't have enough visual effects artists, and it just feels like there's this set in stone timeline that they're always forced to reach. But listen, I want to look back to like 2007 to 2009, give or take. I feel like that was such a peak time for CGI. And it's funny because, like I mentioned earlier in this video, you'd think that naturally, just like how, we have phones, and iPhones and computers and how technology has just advanced over time, you'd think that movies would look better. But I feel like 2007 to 2009 was just such an incredible era, because during those years, we got two films that I believe, or actually three sets of films that I believe to have the best CGI that I've ever seen. The Michael Bay Transformers films, the Pirates of the Caribbean films, and the Avatar films. And of course, those are just single movies, but either way, we got the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie with Davy Jones, some of the most impressive character design from a CGI standpoint I have ever seen. Transformers with the Autobots and Decepticons, they look stunning. The sound design that's mixed with them, it's incredible. And Avatar, don't even get me wrong, that is one of the most, if not the most impressive movie that I have ever seen from a CGI standpoint. I think that the difference was at that time, there was less pressure from the studios. Don't get me wrong, like I already mentioned, there's always been studio interference, but creatives were given time to cook. They were given time to tweak things. There wasn't as much as a set in stone slate or timeline where, hey, you know, it's like the MCU and we're going to have to put out 3 movies next year and 2 shows, and then 3 movies the next year and 2 shows. Speaking of shows, we're going to be talking about that in a minute because that's very important. But it just feels like this time where creatives were given a bit more breathing room, time to relax and actually do what they need to do. Don't get me wrong though, during that era there was studio interference. Like for example, Iron Man, Jon Favreau was given a very short turnaround time, and he's talked about how he really wishes that he had more time to make that film, but Marvel Studios said, hey, we need you to make this film in 2 years, and that sucks, you know what I mean? You need time as a creative to write a script, film, edit, again, put the visual effects in the movie. Sometimes when you're a visual effects artist, you're relying on getting some film, so you have to wait for them to film certain sequences so that you could, of course, edit them. There's a lot of planning. I mean, think about how complicated, even though it's done by computers, it doesn't matter. Think about how complicated the CGI process is. I don't even know how it works, and I never will the rest of my life because these people are experts, and when you rush them, it makes things look a lot worse. And I feel like post-pandemic, that's how things have been, because projects have been getting delayed, and studios just want to pump them out because they need to get these things out of the door so that we can just move on to the next thing. It's so slate focused, it's so future focused that sometimes I feel like they forget to worry about the present. When I look at a good creative, like Denny, for example, who of course is the director of the Dune franchise, he is heavily focused on the visuals of his films. You know, him and Greg Fraser, the cinematographer, of course, they're making sure that the CGI looks good, but then you got companies like Marvel and DC who are just pumping out movies. And of course, we got The Flash 2 years ago, almost at this point. Wow, that's kind of crazy, where that was one of the worst looking films of this decade, honestly. And I actually enjoyed the movie more than a lot of people, but it just looks so bad. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness had some awkward looking shots. I think that some movies are great examples, like I just said, like Dune, like The Batman with CGI. Some parts you don't even notice are CGI, but that's what makes CGI so good, is when sometimes you don't even notice it. Not everything needs to be space and aliens. Now, to sort of contradict myself, I do want to bring up one thing though, because there are so many movies that come out today though that look absolutely incredible. I think one great example is Avatar: The Way of Water. I know that I talked about the first film, but then like 12 years or 13 years later, we got the second film just like 3 years back. That movie is stunning. That might be the most beautiful movie that I've ever seen, but I was just talking about how CGI peaked like 13 years ago, so, you know, wouldn't that be contradicting myself? The difference is James Cameron's been working on that movie for 13 years. He had a clear vision, and that movie was going to make money. So the studios, knowing that these films are going to make $2 billion, and since they're based strictly on the visuals, and don't get me wrong, obviously the story's pretty good, but still, people go to those movies because of their spectacle, because of how beautiful they look. So the studios actually give them time. I just feel bad when some films and some filmmakers, directors, again, editors, visual effects artists especially, get rushed. It's really unfortunate because then it looks bad on them, but if they just had more time, they could do a good job. And I think that something like Avatar: The Way of Water proves that. I think that Dune proves that. I think that we could make the best looking films ever right now. There is no denying that. Again, with the technology that we have, technology that I don't even know how it works, obviously, but I'm just saying it just makes sense naturally. But studios just want to pump these things out. And then another factor that I just wanted to lightly touch on, even though it is a bit more niche for only like certain companies, I think this pretty much for the most part only applies to like Disney and maybe Warner Brothers because they have Max. It's going to be the shows. I don't know if you guys remember, but like November 2019 is when Disney Plus launched, and Netflix for the most part was like the big dog, but they weren't really putting out like theatrical released movies. They were pretty much just show focused. But Disney, of course, they put out movies under the Star Wars name, the Marvel name, this, that, but now they have a streaming service, meaning they have to put out shows so that people will stay on there. If you just keep your old content on there, people are not just going to stay on there forever. Same with Warner Brothers. You know, they want to put out movies, of course, but also also they gotta make stuff for HBO Max. So they just have to divert assets, both of these companies, to making shows. Now that you're making movies, but you also have to make shows, which some require visual arts. They require CGI. I don't think that Moon Knight and Loki are able to, do all this crazy stuff without CGI. Of course, there's some incredible practical effects people and stunt work. That's awesome, and I always salute it. Shout out to Tom Cruise, of course. I feel like he's the, poster child of practical effects. The guy jumped off a cliff just a couple years ago for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. But this is the thing. I feel like now that you have these shows, you're going to have to divert assets. So they're going to try to be as cheap as they possibly can, and maybe now tell a visual artist, hey, listen, I know that you're working on the next Marvel movie, but we also need you in the same time frame to start working on the Marvel show as well. So now they're just busy and they can't do the best work that they possibly can because there's not enough time in the day. Same with, you could just say that HBO and just, Max in general. Let's just say someone's working on a Warner Bros. Movie, and then all of a sudden someone's like, hey, listen, we have this Harry Potter show coming out in just a couple years. We need you to start working on that too, even though I know that you're also working on X movie from X franchise. It's just the point that now studios feels like now they're just so movie and show focused, and of course they're going to try to cut corners and save as much money as they can, that from a business standpoint they're going to try to basically push these people to their limits. So basically at the end of the day, is it studio interference? Yes, it really is. It's as simple as that. Because when you have $200 million, you can easily make the most beautiful looking movie that's ever been created. But studios just want to rush things. They don't really care. They just care about pumping these films out, because the sooner a movie releases, the sooner you're going to get your returns and your box office return, of course. So I think it makes a lot of sense. But listen, guys, that's going to just about do it for this video. Let me know what you guys think about, the state of CGI. Can we get back to that greatness period, to that consistency, I should say? Thanks so much for watching this video. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.